I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and this is considered the second most dangerous city in the state of Kentucky. And Kentucky is considered the 40th most dangerous state. So the state of Kentucky overall, it's very safe. So even this being the second most dangerous city by a lot of larger city standards, it's still considered extremely safe. However, Louisville doesn't submit their crime data to the FBI. This is a problem in a lot of cities where they just think it's okay to not submit their crime data. And anytime I go through a city that is ranked as one of the worst, most dangerous cities in a state, and they don't submit their crime data, it makes me wonder why. Because it must be worse than what people, what people would assume it is, if they're, or it must be really bad if they're not going to submit the data. Because the FBI releases their year, totals or whatever, and people get, figure out all the different statistics and all that from that. And the FBI waits till they get 80% of the cities in America submitted their data. And then they'd submit the data with, whether the crime has gone up or down. So 20% of the cities don't have to submit for the FBI to get their data. And it takes all the way, the 2022 data is released in the fall of 2023, the 2023 data is released in the fall of 2024, etc. And it takes them almost a year to release the data because it takes that long for them to get 80% of the cities to release their data. And this city is one of the ones that don't. And it's one of the larger cities, so the crime data it's not there. The population here is 620,000, and it's been declining since 2020. So that was something that happened with a lot of cities and a lot of states. They started losing population after the summer of Floyd, and places like Tennessee and Florida started gaining population just because of the way the cities or the states were run. But Kentucky, apparently, a lot of the cities were losing population after 2020. But that's not uncommon in America for cities to have had that happen. It's the largest city in Kentucky, and it's nearly twice the size of Lexington, which comes in at number 2. So it's by far the biggest city in Kentucky. It's not even close. And it's considered the 28th largest city in America. So it's a decent sized city, 620,000. It's 62% white, 33% black, 2% Hispanic, and 1% Asian. So it's sort of diverse, mostly just black and white. The average age is 38, and 20% of the population is seniors. So it's an older population. 1 in every 5 people that live here are considered a senior citizen. And with an average age of 38, that's a little on the older side for an average age. There's a 60% homeownership rate here, though, which is 6% lower than the national average. But that's really high. A 60% homeownership rate is really high for a city of this size. It's really high. Try and get over here. Most cities, the homeownership rate, I'll say that if a city can get over 50%, that's good. Because the more people that own a home in a city, the more likely the city is to be safe. Because people are less likely to be, out causing trouble if they own their own home, because they plan on living there for a while, as opposed to people that are renting, that are more transient and they can move in and out and move to different areas of the city and move to different cities on a month-to-month basis. So 60% homeownership rate is, in my opinion, really good, and probably part of the reason that the city is as safe as it is. But like I said, they don't submit their crime data, so I can't get an accurate gauge of just how bad or how good the city is. But there's the average income here is $45,000 a year, which is pretty good for a city of this size. 16% poverty rate. That's really good for a city of this size. It sounds high, 16% of the people living below the poverty line, but that's just typical American cities. That's not at all anything that, you know, it's not an alarming number. It sounds big, 16%, but it's really not. And they have a 42% marriage rate, which is also really high, and which is also a reason why the crime is probably better, because typically people that are married and own their own home, they're raising a family, they're not out causing, you know, trouble on the streets and stuff. 67% of the people that live here were either born in Louisville or in the state of Kentucky. 9% foreign born, and it's showing 5% non-citizen, which, you know, we all know the non-citizen stat is kind of, you know, it's just a number. The people actually have to admit to not being here legally, and so we know that number is not accurate. So I looked up the homicides, because that's about the only stat you really can, you know, get a good gauge of. And 2023, it said there were at least 118 murders. I found another site that said there were 119, but that gave the city a murder rate of 19, which for Kentucky is really high. In 2022, there were 160 homicides, and the murder rate was 25.8. So to give you a perspective on that, the murder rate in Chicago is 22. So in 2023, their murder rate was at least 19, if not higher. And in 2022, it was 25.8. So they're skirting both sides of the murder rate of Chicago. So definitely puts this in a category of, at least where homicides are concerned, higher violent crime rate here. And I was, because I couldn't just find like information, I was looking at one of the websites. It was a city website, and it listed all their open homicides, and there were pictures of hundreds of people each year. I shouldn't say hundreds, but like some of the years had like 80 pictures on there of open homicides, which leads me to believe that they're not solving a lot of the homicides here, which is probably part of the problem of why they have so many. When they're not solving the homicides and putting people in jail, the same people tend to, you know, rack up a few more bodies than they would if you got them off the streets and put them in jail. So if you want to look at that, that's just the Louisville crime website, that website that shows their crime data. But they literally had all these pictures of all these open homicides, and I'm thinking, you can't have 119 homicides and have 90 pictures of people on the website that are open homicides. That's like a clearance rate of hardly anything. So I don't know if that was a mistake on their website, the way they listed it, but it's listing it as they don't solve a lot of homicides if you go by what that website says, their city website. So, and then if we look at the schools here, 36% of the students graduate proficient at reading and math. 48% in the state of Kentucky, and we all know that the U.S. average is only 48% as well. The U.S. doesn't teach kids anything. The kids graduate, they don't know anything when they leave. Less than half of the kids can read and do math at a 12th grade level. Kentucky is right at the national average as far as schooling goes, and Louisville is at 36% of the students graduating proficient at reading and math. Graduating at a 12th grade level for reading and math. That's just over 1 in every 3 are graduating at grade level for reading and math. So if there's a problem with crime in the city, that's a big big reason. If the kids aren't learning anything at school and they can't get a good job, they're just going to be on the streets doing whatever kids on the streets do, and it's going to increase the crime rates. 84% of the people that live here completed the 8th grade, and 82% have a high school diploma. So those numbers might sound like they're really low, but 82% being having a high school diploma in America, that's not that bad. You would like to think that it's bad, but in America, it is not that bad. Well, there's some graffiti. That's the first graffiti I've seen. So this city, like the only real crime data I could get were those homicides for the last couple of years, and I didn't pull up the 2024 numbers because 2024 is not quite over yet. When I'm driving through here, I would have had to guesstimate what it was going to end up being. But the homicides are the only numbers you can pull up, and the homicide numbers here are not good. And you only got 82% of the kids graduating. And only 1 out of every 3 of those are, reading and doing math at a 12th grade level. So things aren't going to get any better here if they can't get the schools better, and especially with those homicide rates, if they can't get those homicides cases closed, they're going to have a lot of problems. It also showed that 28% of the people that live here have a bachelor's degree or better, like have a higher education degree, and that's actually pretty good compared to a lot of cities. But that could be, like 30% of the population is moving in from somewhere else in America. Actually, it's only about it's less than 20%. So that could partly be some people moving in from other states that are making the higher education numbers higher. But 28% for higher education isn't that bad. But the 82% of high school, like I said, in America in the 2020s, that's just about normal. It's maybe a little on the low side, but it's pretty much just normal. The schooling is horrible, so the crime is higher because the kids when you don't have a hope for a future, you don't care about the present. And that's what these kids are doing. They just don't care. And they look at just, today. They don't look at tomorrow. They don't look at where they're going to be in 5 years, because they're just trying to get through the day. And, if you can't even really function well enough to get a job at even a basic place like McDonald's or something like that, because you can't count back change, or you didn't learn the skills that you need to even just have a job. The city it's not going to get any better. So it's a clean city as much as I have seen. There's not litter everywhere. There's definitely not graffiti everywhere. The roads are really nicely paved. There's not homeless people everywhere at all. So the city's got a lot going for it, but they're not solving their homicides, and the homicide numbers are too high. I should have looked up what size their police force is, and to see if this was a city that lost their police force in 2020, because that might be the reason why they aren't solving their homicides. Maybe they lost a good chunk of their police force after 2020, when their population started going. There's a lot of horse racing things here. You just see horse racing images everywhere, which is kind of cool, because of the Kentucky Derby, I imagine. But it's a cute city. I wish I could get accurate crime data for you, beyond just the homicides. But that's the best I can do as far as Louisville, Kentucky goes, because they just don't want to give up the information. So I imagine It's a lot worse than what I described it as. At least the downtown area, it looked all nice and clean. It looked like a nice place to live or visit. If you were somebody that wanted to move here, I'd suggest that if you have kids, you definitely research the area so you make sure you get them in an area that has good schools, because not all of them are going to be bad. And if you want to move here, you have to really do a lot of research into figuring out which areas have the higher crime. Because there's areas that where the crime is bad. Now we're crossing this bridge. I'm not even sure what river this is, but it's huge. Anyway, that's all I got for you for Louisville, Kentucky. If you like this video, hit that like button and maybe consider subscribing if you're not already. And thanks for watching.